Hello, you. Allow me to take you on a journey back in time. The year is 2012. The world hasn't ended after all. Donald Trump is still just a goofy, innocuous reality TV show host, and the Xbox One and PS4 haven't even been announced yet. The disappointing releases that are Mass Effect 3 and Halo 4 have you wondering what the hell happened to your favorite game franchises, the ones that helped pioneer single-player story modes for the past two console generations. Far Cry 3 will eventually come to save the day at the end of the year, and Journey is an indie hit that will eventually help get a whole new demographic of people into video games. But there is one game that you cannot possibly avoid hearing about. In every corner of the internet, someone has an opinion about it. It's a game that would not only take home most of the Game of the Year awards that year, and would not only spark one of the greatest publisher catastrophes of all time, but it would also come to revolutionize video game storytelling as we know it. And that game was Knack, baby! It's Knack Attack! It's the Telltale's Walking Dead. I mean, you saw it in the title also. Knack came out in 2013, so the joke is just roll the title card. While Telltale Games existed as far back as 2004, the game developing company really entered the public eye with the release of their 2012 video game titled The Walking Dead. The game was a unique experience in a number of ways, but its standout feature was that it was almost solely a narrative-driven experience, even more so than games that were well known for their stories, like the Mass Effect franchise. The gameplay was, for the most part, a large set of character-driven choices and left most of the traditional third-person shooting that you'd find in action games to the wayside. I mean, that didn't stop them from trying, but god, these sections of the game were goofy. The game was released in periodic episodes, with each season being composed of 5 episodes that were released at different dates, almost like a TV show. What you have to understand about 2012 is that there was really no such thing as a good video game movie tie-in at the time. If you can find me a single example, please let me know in the comments down below. The Wachowskis had tried their hand at making a Matrix video game that would help tie up the loose ends of their trilogy, and this worked to disastrous effect, notoriously. James Cameron tried his hand at an Avatar video game tie-in that would serve as the prequel to his universe, and it was met with exactly as much critical praise as you'd think. Most of the time you'd find these types of games at the EB Games bargain bin, just littered with, whatever Transformers tie-in had just been released, as well as, the Curious George game. I don't even know if that's a game, but show an image if there probably is. Find one. Editor, find one. Please, I love you. Ugh. The very idea that some comic book tie-in game would serve as the revolutionary catalyst for narrative video games, that freaking blew everyone's minds all over the floor when this game came out. Holy bejesus, you had to be there to experience it. The first game in the series is best known for having a ton of memorable characters, the most important of whom being Lee, who is controlled by the player, and Clementine, who's a character so amazing that my girlfriend and I have literally considered naming our first child after her. To my parents' chagrin, it's choices. So what aside from the revolutionary, almost non-gameplay and episodic structure made The Walking Dead so special? Well, you can witness some of the interesting subversions of typical zombie apocalypse narratives from the get-go. Lee starts the game off having just been arrested for murder, so while most people assume that a zombie apocalypse would be an event that restricts and constrains our protagonist, the zombie apocalypse actually saves Lee. It frees him from captivity and introduces him to Clementine, who gives him a new purpose for his life. This conflicting tension of being free versus being tied down is in many ways the most prevalent thematic presence in this game. For the most part, Lee has to choose between taking a risk to journey out into the unknown, which puts both his life on the line as well as Clementine's, or stay tied down to a group of survivors who are more doomed to fail than Sargon of Akkad's political career.
Just you wait.
The game lets you know that the decisions that you make will have a direct impact on Clementine's childhood development. These decisions are highlighted by the legendary "Kenny will remember this" cue, which appears anytime you do something that is supposed to influence the future interactions in the game. So here's the secret, sneaky thing that the Telltale Walking Dead series gets away with, and I'm here to tell you what it is because guess what? I played the game twice to completion and made completely different choices both times. So here's the secret, ladies and gentlemen. Drumroll, please. At the end of the day, the choices you make don't matter. Because here's the situation. The story manages to maintain thematic cohesion regardless of the choices being made in the game, and it does this by presenting the player with the illusion of choice. An important thing to understand is that this game excels at making the players seem like the choices they make influence the narrative, but despite what the various flowcharts of the game would suggest, the only choices that really affect the game much are those that affect your rapport with Kenny, whose narrative consequences only show face during the last episode of the game, or whether you save Carly or Dork, Doug, Doge, the hell's his name? Yo, what's the guy's name? The guy, there's like a... she can't hear me. Anyway. Nobody saves Doge. Everybody saves Carly. Sorry, Doge, you are alone. That isn't to say that the choices that you make don't affect your gameplay experience. They just don't affect the narrative in a direct way, and more so serve the purpose of making each individual experience of the game feel unique. For example, seemingly important decisions like who to give food to when you need to distribute the rations. That decision seems really important when it's happening, but it doesn't have any direct impact on the plot no matter what you choose. Lily leaves you no matter what, whether you put her on the side of the road or keep her in the truck. Duck dies no matter what situation you put him in beforehand. If you save Ben, he dies within 2 episodes. None of this changes between playthroughs regardless of how you play. Trust me, I've played it twice, I've gone through everything, and at the end of the day, the experiences were almost identical, which is crazy in a game that is entirely based on the choices you make influencing the narrative. At the risk of losing half of you to overly academic language, Roland Barthes, oh, that is a hard name to pronounce, I sound like fucking Donald Duck. Roland, did I get it right? Roland Barthes. Whatever, I tried. Roland Barthes was a structuralist theorist who posited that stories had 2 main types of story events: kernels and satellites. Kernels are what keep a story together, so the whole thing would fall apart if they were any different. For example, if Lee never finds Clementine up in the treehouse, then you never get to journey around with her and try to find a group together, so the entire narrative would be torn at the seams. Satellites, on the other hand, are more trivial or incidental actions that don't really move the story forward. They can technically change, and you'd largely have the same story. This structuralist terminology is super useful when discussing The Walking Dead's first installment, because almost all of the choices that you make in the game affect the satellites of the story and almost never affect the kernels. So, we good? I promise no more academia on this video. I only included this part because Innuendo Studios has this video that seems to suggest that there could be multiple different Kennys, depending on how you've played the game. But as someone who's played the game twice, I hate that that's a humble brag. It's like, bruh, I played the game twice. But really, the fact that I've played the game twice seems to, give me a unique understanding of this game that no one else seems to have. The stories are the same no matter what you do. Period. So with that in mind, you feel like you're getting to raise Clementine, but it's kind of hard for you to mess it up. You're gonna end up in a situation where you've helped Clementine grow as a person no matter what you've chosen by the end of the game, which makes the conclusion a whole lot more poignant. So here's the question, is that it? Right? Did this game revolutionize stories in video games because it gave people the illusion of choice? Well, yes and no. While discussing this game with a colleague of mine, I learned that she had a rather different experience playing The Walking Dead than I did, because she was pregnant while she was playing it. Having kids changes you in potentially different and weird ways. Shoutouts to Miriam for the prep talk, by the way. I'd never really thought of this before, but when you have a kid, they're always kind of watching you, trying to learn how to behave. So, in a sense, you're basically tempted to present them with a more idealized version of yourself. That's what the first season of The Walking Dead is trying to get across: redemption through the process of parenthood. While that theme seems simple enough, the setting of The Walking Dead makes it a much more fascinating thing to explore. What happens when a group of cannibals tries to eat you? Do you kill the one that you've already disarmed, knowing that he could one day come back and get you? Or do you let him live because he's defeated and you know that the odds of him coming back are statistically infinitesimal given the scope of the world? Do you let Ben die, knowing that he not only betrayed you, but even wants to die, even though he's a good kid at heart? So while the game's mechanics are revolutionary as a means of allowing the player to engage in a story in a unique and compelling way, it's tied down to one hell of a thematically cohesive story that explores the role of parenting in childhood development, as well as how that role is both restricting and liberating. These themes come to a dramatic crescendo during the game's bone-rattling conclusion, whose presence in the game has caused it to become one of the most single notorious endings in video game history. Oh boy. Because at the end of the game, Lee gets bit, and the man that you spent all this time with, who you endured trial and tribulation with, dies in front of you, at which point you are given the last choice that you can make: choosing how to die. The tragedy of the game's conclusion ultimately comes down to one simple fact. Lee dies at the end of the game because he loves Clementine. When Clementine runs away from Lee at the end of episode 4, Lee rushes out to find her and gets bitten as a result. While Clementine has given Lee a reason to live, she is ultimately the reason that he dies. He quite literally sacrifices his life for her. By the way, the reason that Lee is so choked up at the end of the game is because his voice actor was literally bawling while in the recording booth, and they decided to keep that version of his line reading into the game. Lee finds redemption for his past actions by helping a little girl learn how to survive in the violent world that she's forced to inhabit, and it is by mirroring you that she will hopefully be able to bring forth your values, regardless of what those values may be. While Clementine has liberated Lee, she has also, to an extent, chained him down. It is no accident that at the beginning of the game, you start off in handcuffs, are then freed of them, and then return to handcuffs at the end of the game, left to contemplate whether you should ask your child to shoot you or leave you behind to turn into a walker. Allegorically speaking, Lee is a dying parent, watching his child continue to move on into the world, confident that she'll find a way to make it, even if she doesn't entirely believe that herself. While the role of parenting is liberating, it is simultaneously restricting in a number of ways, and I can't think of a more artful way to demonstrate that than by having Lee die, his death itself being a manifestation of the time lost that all parents experience when raising children. When Lee died, I was sad, but I could still never regret finding that little girl in the treehouse. She made the whole game worth playing. The first game in the Telltale Walking Dead series is nothing short of a revolutionary masterpiece, not only for its unique art style and narrative-centered focus, but how it perfectly encapsulates the nuances and the rewards and anxieties faced by not only parents, but also people thinking about becoming parents. That is to say, Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1 isn't just a masterpiece because it revolutionized the form that video games could use to tell stories, but also had an exceptional story to tell in the first place. End of Part 1.
But hey, lick and subscribe for part 2, baby. We're doing multi-parters. And Act 2, you know the sequel's even better.
Oh god, please like and subscribe. I need likes for validation.